The CEO refused to shake a humble single dad's hand. Not knowing, he owned 50% of her company. The marble floors of the company's headquarters reflected the morning sunlight as hundreds of employees gathered in the grand lobby to welcome their newly appointed CEO. Cameras flashed, executives stood in perfect rows, and everyone waited for the woman who had become the youngest CEO in the company's history. At that exact moment, a tired-looking maintenance worker wearing a faded gray uniform stepped inside, carrying a heavy toolbox after fixing a broken water line outside. His hands were rough, stained with grease, and marked by years of honest work. As the CEO approached, he politely extended his hand with a warm smile, hoping to welcome her. She glanced at his dirty hands, frowned, and said she never shook dirty hands before walking past him in front of everyone. The lobby fell silent. Employees exchanged uncomfortable looks, while the humble single father quietly lowered his hand without saying a word. None of them had the slightest idea that the man they had just humiliated secretly owned 50% of the company. Before we continue, if you believe kindness matters more than appearances, and that everyone deserves respect and a second chance, please like this video, leave a comment, share it with someone who believes in compassion, and subscribe to Beyond Kindness for more emotional stories that remind us why humanity always comes first. His name was Daniel Carter. Every employee knew him as the quiet maintenance worker who arrived before sunrise and often stayed long after everyone had gone home. Few people noticed that every evening, after finishing work, he rushed to pick up his 8-year-old daughter Lily from school. Since losing his wife to cancer 4 years earlier, Daniel had become both father and mother to the little girl. Every dollar he earned went toward her education, medical insurance, and the tiny apartment they proudly called home. To the world, he looked like an ordinary working father trying to survive another day. What nobody knew was that Daniel had once helped build the company from nothing. 20 years earlier, he had invested every cent he owned, alongside his best friend, Richard Harrison. When the business struggled, Daniel sold his dream home, worked 3 jobs, and believed in Richard's vision when everyone else walked away. Before Richard passed away unexpectedly, he rewrote the ownership agreement, leaving Daniel with 50% of the company, because he believed no one deserved it more. Daniel never wanted power. He never wanted a fancy office or expensive title. Instead, he quietly continued, working among ordinary employees, because he wanted to understand how people were treated when nobody thought they were important. The board of directors knew the truth, but respected Daniel's request to keep his ownership confidential. They admired how he often discovered problems that executives ignored, simply because employees spoke honestly around someone they believed was just another worker. Over the years, Daniel had personally helped dozens of struggling employees without ever taking credit. He secretly paid hospital bills, funded scholarships for workers' children, and even prevented layoffs during difficult financial years. Yet nobody knew the quiet man carrying the toolbox was the reason. Many families still had jobs. The new CEO, Victoria Lawson, had an extraordinary resume. She had graduated from prestigious universities, transformed struggling businesses, and gained a reputation for making difficult decisions without hesitation. Investors admired her confidence, but confidence had slowly turned into pride. She believed success belonged only to those who looked successful. Expensive suits, luxury cars, and polished appearances had become the standards by which she judged people. The incident in the lobby seemed insignificant to her. She had already forgotten it before reaching her office. Daniel, however, remembered every second. Not because his pride was wounded, but because he had seen fear in the eyes of younger employees watching the scene unfold. They had learned an unfortunate lesson that morning, that appearances mattered more than character. That realization hurt him far more than the insult itself. Over the following weeks, Daniel quietly observed Victoria's leadership. She praised executives while ignoring janitors. She thanked investors but walked past receptionists without making eye contact. She celebrated record profits but dismissed employee concerns about exhausting work schedules. Productivity increased for a short while, but smiles slowly disappeared from the building. The company became more efficient, but far less human. One rainy evening, Daniel noticed a young intern crying alone near the parking garage. She had been publicly embarrassed during a meeting after making a simple mistake. Instead of walking away, Daniel offered her an umbrella and listened without judgment. He reminded her that everyone fails before they succeed and encouraged her not to give up on her dreams. The young woman smiled for the first time that day, unaware. She had just received advice from one of the company's founders. News of Victoria's leadership style soon reached the board. Customer satisfaction had started falling, despite growing profits. Employee resignations increased every month. Creativity disappeared because workers feared making mistakes. Numbers looked impressive, but the company's soul was fading. The annual shareholders' meeting finally arrived. Executives, investors, journalists, and department heads filled the grand conference hall. Victoria confidently prepared a presentation, celebrating her achievements. She believed the meeting would strengthen her reputation even further. As everyone took their seats, whispers spread through the room when Daniel entered, wearing the same maintenance uniform he always wore. Some security guards politely asked him whether he was lost. Several executives looked confused. Victoria noticed him from across the room and felt irritated that maintenance staff had entered such an important meeting. Before she could say anything, the chairman stood up and welcomed the company's largest shareholder. Every conversation stopped instantly. Cameras turned toward Daniel as the chairman respectfully invited him to sit beside the board of directors. The silence became almost unbearable. Victoria's confident expression slowly disappeared as she watched the humble maintenance worker take the seat reserved for the company's 50% owner. The chairman explained that Daniel Carter had chosen to live and work among ordinary employees for years because he believed true leadership could only be understood from the ground floor, not the top floor. He described Daniel's sacrifices, his generosity, and his decision to quietly protect thousands of employees without seeking recognition. One by one, board members shared stories of scholarships, emergency funds, and anonymous acts of kindness that had all been funded by Daniel himself. Victoria felt her heart sink. Suddenly, she remembered the morning she had refused his handshake. The memory became impossible to escape. She realized she had judged the most important person in the company solely because his hands carried the marks of honest labor. When Daniel finally stood to speak, the room expected anger. Instead, he spoke calmly about dignity. He explained that every person in the building, from the cleaner to the CEO, deserved equal respect because every role kept the company alive. Buildings could be constructed with steel and glass, but great companies were built with kindness, trust, and humility. Wealth, he said, never determined a person's value. Character always did. Many employees quietly wiped tears from their eyes. They finally understood why Daniel always greeted everyone with a smile and never acted superior despite his unimaginable wealth. Victoria stood before everyone and admitted she had failed the very people she was supposed to lead. She apologized not because Daniel owned half the company, but because she realized she had become the kind of leader who measured people by appearances instead of humanity. It was the hardest moment of her career, yet also the most important. Rather than demanding her resignation, Daniel offered something much more powerful: a second chance. He believed true leadership was not about punishing mistakes, but learning from them. Together, they launched new programs that valued every employee regardless of position. Executives spent one day each month working alongside frontline staff.